With the NFL draft a little less than a month away, I've got some bold predictions that I'm going to make and share with you. Coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm Patricia Trainer, your host, P-Train, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for Giants Country over on the Fan Nation Network. And a big welcome on in to my everydayers, my Blue Crew community members, my newcomers, and everybody in between. You're all appreciated and loved by yours truly. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day, or if you don't make us your first listen or watch, just for tuning in and spending some time here with the Locked On Giants podcast. Subscribe to the channel, please. If you watch on YouTube, click that notification bell for new videos and like the video. That would help. On today's Locked On Giants podcast, we've got bold predictions for the draft. I've got a few bold predictions that I'm going to make, and I'm going to tell you why I believe this is how it's going to play out. Then we're going to talk about the other free agents that the Giants have signed, the value guys, because, all this focus has been on the big signings, the John Runyons, the Jermaine Illuminors, the acquisition of Brian Burns. But I want to talk about some of the lesser signings on the pod. And then I'm also going to talk about sneaky draft needs. So the Giants have really remade the roster. We'll talk a little bit about the sneaky draft needs that still remain. So that's our schedule for today's Locked On Giants podcast. Again, happy to have you with us, and let's get into it. All right, bold predictions. I have, I think, 4 here. Yeah, 4. So here's what I have for you. I still think, now, if you remember, way back earlier in the year, when some of you started asking me, what are the Giants going to do in the draft? I said to you that they're going to stay with wide receiver until I hear differently, or until I feel differently, or have evidence to believe differently. Folks, I know there's been talk about the Giants possibly trading up to get a quarterback. I know there's been some talk about the Giants trading down. I know some of you want to see that happen. Folks, my bold prediction is simple. The Giants stay at 6 and they take a wide receiver. Now, spoiler alert, we just ran a mock draft over on the Locked On NFL Network. That's going to air, I believe, in a week or so. And the way the board fell is exactly how I think it's going to fall in real time. All right. The one thing I'm not sure about is the trade that was made, but pretty much the way the board fell, regardless of who the first 5 picks are, that's how I think it's going to fall. So that being said, I believe the Giants are going to take a wide receiver at 6. The reason why I say that is not because I don't think the Giants need a quarterback. I absolutely positively do. But here's the thing, folks. A wide receiver, a number 1 wide receiver, is going to be able to help this team right out of the chute. Whereas a quarterback is not. A quarterback is probably going to sit for a year or so while they get him up to snuff and determine once and for all how they really feel about Daniel Jones. So I think from the Giants' perspective, it makes more sense to go with a wide receiver at 6. If they're going to take a quarterback, well, might as well get to the second bold prediction. I could see them potentially trading back into the bottom of the first round to get their quarterback. Now, some of you might say, well, why don't they just wait until the second round to get their quarterback? The reason why I think the Giants will potentially look to trade back into the bottom of the first round, and by the way, I think the trade will entail their second round pick and possibly a pick in next year's draft. But the reason why it makes sense is obvious. first round picks get an extra option year on their contract. So if you're the Giants and you're going to pick a quarterback with the likely intention of having him sit a year or possibly longer, you want to make sure that you get him for an extra year. Makes too much sense not to. So if, for example, and I'm just throwing this out here because I don't think this is going to happen, but let's just say JJ McCarthy's the guy and he falls down the board. If you're the Giants and you see him falling, and in your estimation, the teams that are on the board are going to have other needs, then maybe you say to yourself, okay, we're going to trade back into the bottom of the first round and get our guy. So that's bold prediction number 2, that the Giants trade back into the bottom of the first round. Just makes too much sense in my opinion. All right. Bold prediction number 3. The Giants are going to double dip in wide receivers. All right. I think they're going to take a receiver at 6. I really hope they take Rome Odunze. I know some of you like Malik Neighbors. Some of you are maybe hoping for Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't know that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to fall to the Giants, but I think either Odunze or Neighbors can be there. And I think if Odunze's there, you grab him. And here's why, folks. Odunze has a 75% contested catch rate, which based on all draftable receivers in this year's class that have at least 75 pass receptions, Odunze leads them all and by a wide margin. You want a guy who can go up there and get the jump balls, all right? They tried to get that with Kenny Golladay and it didn't work out. If they can get Odunze in here, that's the guy who can make your contested catches. Plus, watch Odunze on film. The guy's catch radius is absolutely sick. You put the ball somewhere in his ozone layer, his stratosphere, he's going to come up with the catch. All right. Even if the ball is off target a little bit or if it's behind him, he's going to come up with the catch more often than not. There's just so many reasons to like this kid. And I think if they take him, not only, again, will he hit the ground running day one, but he will give whoever ends up being the quarterback for the long term a nice, big, reliable target to throw to. And isn't that what I've always said, folks? Get the offensive pieces around the quarterback up to snuff. The receiver core they have right now, not bad, but just imagine what a number 1 guy could do. Now, why do I say they're going to double dip? Very simple. Isaiah McKenzie signed to a 1-year deal, and he might be more of a special teamer. They just agreed to terms with Isaiah Hodgins. I suspect that's a 1-year deal. Darius Slayton is going to be a free agent after this year. So there's going to be openings potentially at receiver. So if they get another guy from this very deep class, why not? You know, you can never have too many receivers, even though, last year they did. But I could see them adding another receiver because remember, this offense aspires become more explosive, more of a vertical deep threat, and you need speedy guys who could do that. And they should be able to get some good receivers as late as, I would say, probably the 4th round of this draft. So I think they double dip. All right, the last bold prediction I'm going to make. Cornerback 2. I think they're going to want a veteran for that spot, but I also think they're going to go and draft. Now, right now, you look at the cornerback situation. You've got Deonte Banks, who's locked in, obviously. But right now, your cornerback 2, Nick McLeod, you need him over on special teams. I mean, he was one of their best, if not their best special teams players last year. So they also have Trey Hawkins, who started off as cornerback 2, but showed he still had some development to go. They have Cordell Flott, who I think is going to be a bigger part down in the slot, to be honest with you, than more so on the outside. And then Aaron Robinson, who, spent the last couple of years injured. Really don't know what we have in him. And quite honestly, I don't know if they're going to continue on with him. I'd be surprised at this point. He's just missed so much time. So, to develop him at this point, he's so far behind. So I think, the ideal scenario for the Giants with cornerback 2, Bring in a vet because, you could use some additional veteran experience back there, but look to draft the eventual long-term cornerback too, if you can. This is a deep cornerback class. I think the Giants will address the position in the draft as well as free agency. All right, coming up next, sneaky draft needs for the Giants. Don't go anywhere. I'll have that for you right after this. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and to make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so that you can do more of it. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and is designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you find your assigned therapist isn't a match, you can switch at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And don't forget, folks, it's Friday night. And Friday night means one thing. That's right. Locked On Giants Live. Traina, Tana, Dog. We're going to start things off 7:30 p.m. Come along. Get your favorite beverage. Pull up a comfortable chair. Relax, put some soft music on, take part in the community chat that we have. We're going to go for about a couple of hours as we get you ready for what's next with the Giants. It's going to be a lot to talk about, and hope you will join us. Again, it'll be 7:30 p.m. Eastern. That'll be on the YouTube channel. If you miss it, don't worry. I'll have the audio for you on the audio channels, and of course, you can see the replay on the YouTube channel. So Locked On Giants Live, Traina, Tana, Dog. I'm excited. I can't wait. I love talking with Dog and Tana. They are awesome, as well as you guys are, So hope to see you there. All right, let's talk draft sneaky needs for the New York Giants. Now, thus far, the roster has definitely changed up significantly. They have added offensive linemen. And matter of fact, before I started taping, the Giants announced that they had agreed to terms with Matt Nelson, who is an offensive tackle, formerly with Detroit. So that's another offensive lineman added to the two that they signed the other day, added to the two that they signed at the beginning of free agency. So really, that's like 5 new offensive linemen that the Giants are bringing in. And who knows, they might still even draft one. I wouldn't rule that out. But, you can never have too many offensive linemen. And I think what the Giants are trying to do with our offensive line is, because some of this younger talent hasn't really worked out, maybe they're going to have them take a step back so that Carmen Brasillo can develop them. And in the meantime, because this unit needs to hit the ground running, go with veteran depth. But let's talk about the sneaky needs here. I still say running back is a sneaky need. If the Giants can get a power back, better. Okay, remember the days of Brandon Jacobs and Ahmad Bradshaw, how they had two very different styles that, complemented each other. Jacobs was the big bruising pounder, and Bradshaw would kind of, hurt you with his quickness. That's what I think the Giants would like to get back to. And it's interesting. Over on Giants Country, we had an article about would the Giants maybe be a fit for Ezekiel Elliott, who is no longer a bell cow. He's no longer the runner he used to be at Dallas when he was in his prime. But, in a committee approach, that's the guy that, would make sense. But hey, if you can't get Ezekiel Elliott because of the cost, maybe the Giants look to draft a power back in this draft. All right, another sneaky need. And I still say this even though they signed a couple guys and re-signed Lawrence Cager. Tight end. We still don't know what Darren Waller's going to do, but regardless, the Giants need to add, if they can, an athletic tight end. Now, I know everybody's going to say, well, if they need that, they should go and draft Brock Bowers, who is probably going to go, if not in the first round, I would say definitely by the second round. I don't think the Giants are going to go tight end that soon. But if they can find an athletic tight end who can maybe, in the future team up with Daniel Bellinger and give them a 1-2 punch, they should really do that. They should look to do that. They need a guy who can block too, because the more blockers they have, especially with the offensive line as it's being reshaped, the better it's going to be for the quarterback's health. All right, another sneaky need, interior defensive line. Giants really haven't addressed that position in free agency. They lost Ashawn Robinson, which we kind of knew was going to be the case. And they have DJ Davidson, obviously. They have Jordan Riley, two guys that they're very high on. I'd like to see them, and let's not forget Raheem Nunez-Roches too, but I'd like to see them add another young guy. You can never have too many defensive linemen, just like offensive line, the deeper the defensive line rotation, the better it's going to be. So I think that's still very much a sneaky need for the Giants that they're going to hopefully address in the draft. Now here's one that I'm going to just throw out there. I don't know if they're going to do this. I had heard earlier in the year that they were contemplating it, but maybe they just haven't found one. Maybe they stopped looking. I don't know, but I wonder if they don't consider bringing in a fullback. Now, the pure fullback has kind of, dwindled with a lot of teams. A lot of teams prefer to use tight ends or turn them into like H-backs and whatnot. And I understand why, because it gives you more flexibility as to what you can do, whereas a fullback is generally just your big bruiser blocker. But I think if they get the power back that I talked about before, maybe they can get away with not having a fullback. And it's interesting because if I'm not mistaken, Brian Dable, when he was up in Buffalo, had a fullback. He has not had one with the Giants. They've gone with tight ends to do that type of work. So I'm curious to see if they add a fullback, but if they do, it won't necessarily be a draft pick. It'll probably be an undrafted free agent, somebody who tries out. The last sneaky need is safety. They added Jalen Mills, obviously. They had Dane Belton, who is projected to start for Xavier McKinney's vacant spot. Obviously, Jason Pinnock will be back, but they could really use some more depth at that spot. And, it's a fairly good class of safeties. You're probably looking at a day 3 pick would be my guess for safety. I don't know that it would be, a higher priority, but I think it's a need that they need to certainly look at. And you know what? I'll give you one more. I didn't originally have this on my list, but I'm going to give you one more. And I think this could also be a potential day 3 type of pick. Inside linebacker. All right. So they're set with Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden as their 1-2. Behind them, they're going to have Darian Beavers competing. Now, Darian Beavers, of course, was on the practice squad all last year as he continued his rehab from the torn ACL he suffered as a rookie. They are not bringing back Isaiah Simmons. It doesn't look like it. Isaiah Simmons probably not a fit for what they want to do on defense. So, they have Carter Coughlin that they brought back, but he's more of a special teams guy. I think maybe they look to add another inside linebacker for depth, just in case, God forbid, knock on wood, that McFadden or Okereke, for whatever the reason, can't play. Hopefully that won't be the case, but, how often do you see these guys go back-to-back years without missing a snap? So those are the sneaky needs I see for the Giants for the draft. We'll see how many of them are addressed. Going to be interesting. I can't wait to break all this down. This is a draft that I'm really excited to see because it's such a pivotal one for the New York Giants, and we'll see how they handle it. So, all right, coming up next, the other free agents. Got to talk about some of these value free agents that the Giants signed because I have some thoughts about that. I'll tell you about it right after this. Hey, Giant fans, say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. Don't forget, tonight, Friday night, Locked On Giants Live, train a Tana dog. Be there or be square. Just kidding. Hope you'll be there. All right, in this segment, let's talk real quick about the other free agents that the Giants have signed. All right, we've talked about John Runyon Jr., Jermaine Illuminor. We talked about the acquisition of Brian Burns via trade. But there have been a bunch of value signings, what I consider value signings. And these are guys, by the way, that are integral for depth. So some of the names that are worth mentioning: Mills, Casey Kreider, who they re-signed, the long snapper, Chris Manhurst, tight end, Isaiah McKenzie, receiver, special teamer, Gunnar Olszewski, obviously punt returner, Stinney, the offensive lineman, Jack Stoll, another tight end, Carter Coughlin. These are all guys that count for approximately $1.152 million against the cap. They are signed to veteran minimum deals. All right. So what that means is, as long as they sign for 1 year and it's under a certain amount as far as the guaranteed money that they get, they count for the equivalent of what a second-year player would count against the cap. So it's a cap-saving type of deal, so that the second tier, if you will, of players doesn't get squeezed out. Okay, so these are all guys who think special teams, and I kind of like what Joe Shane's doing here, because every year special teams is probably the most competitive unit, because you got a lot of young kids who come in who are hungry, who want to impress, and they want to make the team, however they can. So their best course of action is, of course, special teams. And if they make it via special teams, if you have a bunch of these other veteran special teamers signed to veteran minimum deals, if you end up cutting them, your dead money charge is virtually nothing. All right. Depends on how much is guaranteed to them. But if it doesn't exceed a certain amount, you're talking, pennies on the $1 million, so to speak. So I really like, this approach that Shane has taken. Now, speaking of the salary cap, defensive lineman Dexter Lawrence restructured his contract, or actually I should say the Giants restructured Dexter Lawrence. Players, when it comes to restructuring, unless, they're totally like extending it or something like that, the team can go in and they can restructure a contract as long as the player gets the money that is owed to him for that year. So in Dexter's case, he had originally a $16 million base salary, which I believe was fully guaranteed. So what the Giants did was they converted $10 million of that to a prorated signing bonus, which they basically gave to him up front, because he has to get the guaranteed money. Whatever the guaranteed money is, he has to get that up front in the year in which the money is promised. So the $10 million prorates over the remaining life of the contract, that adds an additional $2.5 million to Dexter Lawrence's numbers the rest of the contract. And now the Giants, who had I think they had like $1 million or so, just over $1 million to start the day, they now have 8.731 total. Okay, 8.731 million total cap space and 2.088 million functional cap space. The functional cap space is basically the money that they have to sign guys under the top 51. So how it works is that the Giants have, I think, something like 58 guys under contract. Only the top 51 count towards the salary cap right now. So as a guy signs and knocks out another guy in the top 51, it's just a matter of taking the difference between the cap numbers. So it's not really, like, let's say, player A is signed for $2 million and is part of the top 51, and then player B comes along and signs for $3 million and knocks player A out. The difference is $1 million. So it's not, it's not a pure, exchange, so to speak. So that's how teams are able to afford to count 90 men on their roster without going over the salary cap because of that top 51 rule. So, yeah, that's, a move that was expected. I would expect at some point they will do something with Andrew Thomas's contract, which they will have to do. Thomas has a couple years at the end of his contract where he has no prorated money from a signing bonus. Because remember, a signing bonus can only be prorated 5 years on a contract, maximum of 5 years. And Thomas's deal, I think, was more than 5 years. So that's a deal that I anticipate they'll do. And if they still need money, they may as well look to extend Okereke or do something with Okereke's deal, because that's a guy that's probably not going anywhere for a while either. So the Giants in good shape right now with salary cap. Joe Shane continues to sign guys. As I was getting ready to record, Isaiah Hodgins agreed to terms. That's probably going to be a veteran minimum deal. And the Giants also signed offensive tackle Matt Nelson, who's going to compete for the swing tackle role. That's probably a veteran minimum deal as well. So you're not talking a huge swing on the available cap space. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. End of the week. We'll be back next week with all new shows. So thank you for tuning in and making us a part of your day. And don't forget, tonight, 7:30 p.m., Traina Tana Dog, Locked On Giants Live. We'll see you then. If not, I'll see you on Monday.